Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity Podcast. Join Stewart Heath for down-to-earth conversations with top professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders who have a story to tell. Let's get rolling.
Nappi as our guest. He is a serial entrepreneur, and the reasons that he does what he does are more than just money. And I can't wait to get all of his story. We were just talking before, and actually said that, wait, let's get it on the podcast. So, Phillip, thanks for taking the time out, and appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you, Stewart. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you. Phillip, you were just about telling us you just about telling me your journey, and I didn't hear the end of it. But when you think back over your life and career, are there game-changing moments that you would say put you on the path to where you are now versus where you thought you would be, perhaps when you first starting out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I think part of the story that I have is, I grew up in a home with a father that was a serial entrepreneur as well. He never worked for anyone except himself, and so I started at a very early age of owning my own business, and had my first business when I was 19 years old, and then a couple more in college. None were very successful, but I was dead set that I knew that if I wanted to do something, I would just go do it. And I think that's probably at the core of a lot of entrepreneurs. But yeah, my path took a much different journey. My father passed away suddenly when I was 10, and my mother moved us to Mississippi shortly thereafter, where she was from, and she passed away 16 months after my father. So,
Oh, wow.
so about 8 months apart, and I was an only child. So I lived with living with my maternal grandmother and my uncle in this small town in Mississippi, and had a good experience, high school. But after high school, I got to be on my own, and I think it really. You hear a lot about identity in our culture right now, and me being a Christian, and Christians forget sometimes of the identity that they have, and we're not talking about gender or anything like that that's going around in our culture right now, but really just about who we are. I'm being a Christian. I'm not an Italian. I'm not Catholic. I'm not a husband. A father, a business owner. I am all of those things, but my true identity at the core of all of that is I'm a child of God, and I'm Christ's friend. I've been adopted as God's child. So that's who I am. But I believed a different identity starting when I was about 19 years old, and I call it there was 4 years I've wreaked a complete path of havoc. I was drug distribution and bookmaking, and I was an entrepreneur, had a lot of ambition, and just got misguided, and I never was happy, obviously, and because I accepted the Lord when I was 12 years old, but I had just lost my way, and I struggled a lot with my salvation after that. Because I would look back and say, well, why did I do all of those things? And was my salvation real when I was 12? And if it wasn't real then, is it even real now? And the Lord answered a lot of those questions for me this past summer when I was on a men's retreat. But I'd say, to answer your question, my defining moment was June 2nd of 1992 when I got arrested.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that was probably the best day of my life. I was staying in college, and I ended up graduating with an accounting degree from Ole Miss, and graduated in May. In June, I went and turned myself into a federal penitentiary. And I'll say that was the best year of my life, I would always say. And I just really sought the Lord with every fiber of my being during that year. I made it that I was going to grow every day intellectually, spiritually, and physically. And create my path. And I really, the way I describe it too, is like I kind of tore myself down as a human being in a good way, and said, all right, let's start over. All right, we got to reset, and we're starting over. And so I wanted to measure backwards, or I wanted to write my eulogy. Sometimes people say, in my mind, I was like, all right, when I get 55, 60, 65 years old and I look back on my life, what do I want to know that I stood for, that people would remember me by? And I created these 7 core tenets, and it was a devoted family man, a responsible, mature man, a just businessman, a loving, caring, and sharing man, a wise and patient man, an inspired and relentless man, and a faithful and believing man. And as I, at 56 years old, and I look back on that, I by the grace of God, I am all of those things. And I'll be married 20 years in May to my best friend. We've got a beautiful 17-year-old daughter that's a believer, works very hard. I've got, 2 great companies. I got great partners that work with me in those companies. But now I feel like I'm at a point where, all right, what's God's calling me to do something more. And so what is, I've always, I very much so believe in the tithe. And all my partners do as well. And it's a immense blessing to be able to give the Lord what's his already.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Lord's calling me to do more, and whether it's with my time or definitely with finances. And I've read this one book. I just finished it not too long ago. It's called The Treasure Principle. And also been reading the book called Halftime. And it's a guy that was a very successful business guy, and he's at the halftime of his life, and he's like, all right, now I'm going to move now from success to significance. And because there's a difference. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, to go back to your question, that was obviously that was a turning point for me. Was that June 2nd of 1992.
Well, that's a pretty big moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Had some trouble myself, and I went through a similar time, and it's it'll wake you up. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
anyway. So similar to that, um, maybe yeah, I'm going to ask a similar question, but I'm going to ask you about a bump in the road along the way, and most of us our age, we've had several bumps, and certainly being arrested could be a bump in the road, but
Yeah.
maybe there's another one. So a lot of people have game changers, and a lot of our entrepreneurs will tell us about, well, I got fired and ended up
Mm-hmm.
starting a company and stuff like that. So, but share with us some time about a bump in the road, and maybe that's the same one, but tell us about how you navigated through it and got to the other side of it. Bump in the road can just be some unexpected circumstance, or it could be, like you said, an arrest. So pick
Mm-hmm.
pick
Yeah.
pick a bump that you've experienced and tell us about that.
The I had when I moved to Nashville 26 years ago, I bought my first roll-off dumpster business, and that's the industry I'm in right now, service in the construction industry. And I actually bought it at the newspaper. And I had a partner, a guy that I knew from college, and his father that were my business partners, and they had control. They had 51% combined, but I was running the business. I was running the day to day, and you know I've had better partners since that experience. But there was I had my brother-in-law who's been a mentor. He's 20 years older than me and best friend and brother and a fellow believer. And he wanted to come in as a partner and buy these guys out. And they couldn't agree to terms. They thought it was worth more than it was really worth. And I was at the point where I was meeting with attorneys considering filing bankruptcy because the business was insolvent. There was no doubt about it. And I went and met with one attorney and he was actually in Brentwood, Tennessee, but he had been in the front office of the San Francisco 49ers, and somebody that was an associate of his got me to meeting. I was telling him what's going on, and I was running the day to day, and they were living in other places. And he said, "You go back to your office right now, and you draft up your resignation, and you fax it over to them, and they'll sell it." And I just couldn't do that because I was so loyal to my drivers, to my team. I I loved that business that I had felt like I created and built, and I wouldn't do it. But weeks go by, and I'm still talking to different sets of attorneys about filing bankruptcy, and of course my name was on it, my personal name was on everything, and I don't have a lot of quit in me, and I wasn't going to do it, but that afternoon, the business partner, he never called me, ever. Never checked in with me. They never wanted to see financials. He never asked me what I was doing or anything. But that afternoon, it was weird. He called me and he said, "Where have you been? I've been trying to call you all morning." And he was on the note just as much as we were, and he had a heck of a lot more to lose than I did. And I said, "We've been meeting with bankruptcy attorneys and we're getting ready to file bankruptcy." He called me back in an hour with a price, and we got the deal done. So that, to me, that, and then what happened after that with my brother-in-law coming in was nothing short of magical, really, about how we, with the help of some attorneys, navigated to wrangle the assets, settle with the creditors and wrangle the assets and put them over into another entity. Because he and I don't blame him. He wanted no ties to the old entity. He wanted to start fresh, but we had to get the assets removed. And and it was playing poker is all I started playing poker when I was about 18 years old, and I didn't enjoy that part. But that was something that I just really decided that I'm digging my heels in and I'm not quitting. And the Lord just kind of opened the doors for that phone call and for that time. But it's interesting because I had another business that wasn't successful. And we kept fighting and I wouldn't quit. And, you've got a guy that I worked with one time, this entrepreneur, I had a little business with him, and he said, "You got to have stick to it to this," is what he called it. And to never quit. And, but at the same time, you have got some parameters. If somebody's a young entrepreneur and says, "All right, I'm going to invest this amount of money and I'm going to give it this amount of time. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go do something else." So one of my business partners said, "If you're going to lose early and lose quick." So
fail fast.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can learn.
Go do something else now. But yeah, that was something that I had to go through that really, it taught me a lot of, furthered my resolve that I was going to be successful. Mm-hmm.
Well, while you've been talking, I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I'm pretty sure I used to be one of your customers at Tennessee Waste because
Okay.
I had a company called Equity Builders Group, and we were small, primarily in the Spring Hill area, and built some starter homes mainly, and we didn't do so hot either. Didn't quite make it out of 2009, but yeah, I remember you guys, and it's like, wow, I hadn't thought of that name in a long time. Well, so this next question is one of my favorite to talk to. I to entrepreneurs and who I saw sometimes called veterans of many wars. If you're starting anything, or if you're certainly doing in business, it's like every day there's a new problem that you got to solve. So entrepreneurs are just like problem solvers on steroids, kind of a thing. So, but to really drive your organization forward, you have to stay current on your industry. You have to learn things that are not necessarily natural, like management and how to motivate people and stuff like that. And then so there's this concentric circles of all this stuff that we need to be stay up and current on. How do you do that? How do you stay current so that you can lead your organization?
Well, I think, as far as from a product offering, service offering, that's what I love about what we do, because I call it, it's a blocking and tackling business.
Yeah.
It's trucks, it's containers. Two of the core tenets I've always used is that I'm not going to ask anyone to do anything I'm not willing or have not done previously. I always kid and seriously kid. It's why we've never been in the porta job business, because I'm not going to do that. And then we want to treat people the way we want to be treated.
Yeah.
So if we stick to those two things, so taking very good care of your team, your family, your drivers, everybody that's making the operations happen. But as far as one of the things that I can do, that, like you said, to evolve, to learn, to grow, is reading, is coaching classes. Entrepreneur coach. Myself and two of our partners just signed up for what's called Strategic Coach, and Dan Sullivan started it. He wrote the book 10X and
Yeah.
Who Not How and Gap in the Gain and all
Who
really
Not
good
How is one
stuff.
of my favorites. So yeah.
Yeah. I know my wife's getting sick of that. Me bringing that up, but the we just signed up. We started in January. It's a commitment. It's an investment for
Yeah.
sure, and it's a quarterly. We go to Chicago, and but the stuff that's coming out of that, just even one session and some follow up stuff that we were having to do, it's amazing to see. And that's when I was telling my wife about it. She was like, "Well, what is it about?" And I said, "Well, it's how to make more money and work less." I mean, that's and that's for
Work smarter, not
me.
harder. Yeah.
And you say that to somebody, and they're like, "That's not possible. You can't do that." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you can."
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
these people. I mean, you look at Elon Musk. I mean, he doesn't have his hand in everything he's doing. He can't. There's no possible way. He's got way too much going on, especially now. He's
Yeah.
cleaning up the government, but
Right.
there's no way that so he's working through people, and to achieve his objectives, and it's an exciting thing to see. And as I mentioned earlier, and that what's the Lord got for me next from a giving of time and resources and money standpoint, but it's the way to achieve those things is working through people.
Yeah.
And so it's very exciting to see that. But that's how I think is a good way to, because at the end of the day, you got to motivate your team. You got to incentivize them. I always knew I can't make you do anything. I've got to incentivize and motivate you.
Right.
So. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned a bit ago that you've got two businesses. I
Mm-hmm.
know I'm looking at your LinkedIn, yeah, Vavia,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a trash roll-off business,
Mm-hmm.
roll-off container. What's your other one?
So we have two entities. We are actually, Vavia LLC is actually the franchisor. So we are the franchisor for
Gotcha.
Vavia. We're operating, and then we own the Nashville location. So there's two entities, two different customers that we're chasing, and but then we're also, from the franchisor standpoint, we're in 19 other markets in the Southeast.
Wow.
Carolinas and Florida and Texas, and then we just opened up Phoenix and Denver. So yeah, that's the two companies.
Well, that's interesting. It's not a type of business I would thought would have been franchisable. I mean,
Yeah.
huh, be interesting. Um, okay, so we're the growth, grace, and prosperity. We've sort of covered the first two. As we talk about prosperity, and I think a lot of goals, and you just sort of touched on it, how to make more money by working less. And a lot of times what that means is developing multiple streams of income. And some people do passive stuff, some people don't. So without any dollar amounts or account numbers or anything like that, can you share how you deploy your investable cash as you've had prosperity? Do you just do it by starting another business, or are you doing other things? What do you do with the money?
Invest in the markets, and I've never been one to invest in land, but I'm starting to think more about that. And it's amazing when you think about, people want to invest in land, or what's that mean? Am I flipping houses, or am I accumulating rental properties? Those two things never appeal to me whatsoever. I really want to stick anything I do. I want it to be a B2B,
Yeah.
business to business model. I don't want
Yeah.
nothing. I am part of the general population, general public, so I understand that, but I'd rather let other people deal with them,
Mhm.
and do B2B. But when you think about land, you just think about just dirt. I mean, just flat out dirt. I mean, it's just
God's
you,
not
you
making
don't,
any more of it.
he's not, and you don't have to worry about the water lines busted. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about that. It's just dirt. And I've owned a lot of heavy equipment in the past. Me and my partner did, and so I've always loved that piece of it. So that is something that yeah, that maybe in another chapter that I would do a little bit more of. My one of my business partners told me one time that about the video when we were starting it. He said, "Your focus is your capital," and and I'll have people will contact me and say, "Hey, do you want to invest in this? Do you want to invest in that?" And I'm like, you know, no, I really just want to focus on Vivia, and and I want to make it the best, because if we hit our numbers and our goals, which we're well on the pathway to do that, then I can go play in some dirt, if you will.
Right.
But the staying, because to me, it's all about, I want peace. I want to come home. I want to sleep well at night. I don't want to be worried about this, that, or another. There's enough worries that I got to deal with. Spreading myself too thin, I don't think does anybody any good. And so just focusing and doing one thing and doing it really, really well, and going home and turning your phone off and spending time with your family, you know?
Yeah. No, I
Mm-hmm.
can certainly identify. I've always wanted to be a land investor as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've looked me at, we do syndicated real estate, but the downside to land is one, it doesn't cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll mow grass and and pay taxes on it maybe
Mm-hmm.
for 20 years, and then something happens and it becomes worth a lot more, depending on where you bought it. And it might take 2 years, it might take 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but there is an appeal to owning land. It's probably a little
Mm-hmm.
bit like being a farmer, frankly.
Yeah.
So I love that. Um, so coming down to our last question,
Mm-hmm.
Philip, if you were mentoring somebody, or somebody just wanted to follow in your footsteps, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Well, people always ask, like, what's my purpose? I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do in life, or who I'm supposed to be, and what I'm supposed to. And I'll always go back. Well, are they a believer or not? And if you're a believer, your purpose is to serve God,
Yeah.
and to love Him with your whole heart. And if you do those things, do that, He will direct your paths, and put you in the places that you need to be. And sometimes the places that he wants you to be is not some place you want to be, because He's trying to teach you something, and show you something and build you to something greater. And so I just, being being rejoicing always, and just giving thanks in all situations, is everybody talks about, I want to be happy. Happiness is fleeting, joy is
Mhm.
everlasting,
Yeah.
and you get joy from being grateful. And the so it's that would be the first thing. But just try some different things. That people say, "Oh, choose your job you love, you never work a day in your life." But you know, you can't. Sometimes you can't turn your hobby into a money making proposition, and sometimes it's best to keep your hobbies your hobbies. And
Yeah.
because I love to cook. I cook for my family. I've always loved to cook, And after we sold Tennessee Waste, I was thinking about, well, maybe I'm gonna go to culinary school. And I looked at some, and we were in Italy for a while, and I took some cooking classes there, and I just quickly realized that like I don't want to be in a kitchen making the same daggum thing 30 times a night. That does not sound like fun to me. I'm gonna keep my cooking as a hobby and do it for my family and my friends. So um, yeah, just try some different things if you're a young entrepreneur. Like I said, you too. Like if you're going to do something, and figure out how much you're going to lose, stick to that, and how much time you're going to give it. And if it doesn't work out, punt and go do something else. And it's the early years of being an entrepreneur are very, very, very hard, and that's why you really want to kind of do it when you're younger. Because when you get older, you got more obligations, you got more responsibilities for family and maybe a mortgage and all of those things. And when you're younger, you can work 60, 70-hour weeks.
Yeah.
When you get older, it's not as easy.
Yeah.
And
hopefully we're working smarter.
Exactly.
And being more productive, but yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I look back now, I can't even believe the number of hours I used to work, especially during tax season when I was practicing as a CPA. So, hey, Phillip, if anybody in the audience watching this wanted to get in touch with you, how would you suggest they do that?
I think if so my work email is a little difficult, but my personal email is very easy. It's my first name, last name @gmail.com.
Okay.
So it's PHILLIPNAPPI at gmail.com. That's easy to remember, and I'm never giving that email up. So
yeah. Well, we'll make sure that and the link to your LinkedIn profile is in the show notes for people who want to reach out. And just really appreciate you taking time out today. You've got a fascinating story. I love how you're putting God first and you're pursuing His purpose, which is what we should all be doing. I just absolutely love that. So again, thank you for being here.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. All right. See you.
And to the audience, we say thanks for watching this episode of the podcast, and be sure to come back for another one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Growth, Grace, and Prosperity podcast. If you'd like to be a guest, visit growthgraceprosperity.com/guest. We'd love to hear your story.